Sometimes, the silence of the night hides things best left unseen. For one Texas homeowner, a single night turned their quiet sanctuary into a stage for an unsettling mystery. This is the story of the Midnight Visitor. At 3:15 a.m., a family was asleep in their home nestled within a quiet Texas suburb. Their peaceful night was broken by a familiar chime, a Ring doorbell alert. The homeowner, groggy but curious, picked up their phone to check the footage. What they saw immediately sent a chill down their spine. The screen revealed a hooded figure standing just outside their front door. The timestamp at the bottom of the footage confirmed it was the dead of night. The person wasn't moving at first, just standing on the edge of the porch, seemingly deep in thought. Then, they began to pace back and forth, their footsteps barely audible through the camera's microphone. As the homeowner watched, their unease deepened. The figure would stop periodically to look directly into the camera. It was as if they knew someone was watching and wanted them to see, but what? The hood concealed their face, adding to the sense of dread. Their movements were deliberate yet erratic, oscillating between pacing and unnerving stillness. Then it happened. The figure stepped closer to the door. They raised their hand, paused for a moment, and then rang the doorbell. The homeowner froze. Should they answer? Call the police? They decided to stay quiet and observe. The hooded person lingered for a few seconds, then abruptly turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the street. It felt as if the figure had sensed their reluctance to confront them. The next morning, the homeowner reviewed the footage again, this time with fresh eyes. They noticed subtle details they had missed in their half-awake state. The hooded figure's pacing wasn't random. It formed a peculiar pattern, almost like they were marking specific spots on the porch. Even stranger, at one point, they appeared to mouth words directly at the camera, though no sound was captured. The police were called, and officers scoured the neighborhood. They found footprints on several other porches, but no reports of burglary or vandalism. In fact, other residents had doorbell footage showing the same individual roaming the area, yet always leaving without attempting to enter any home. What was the purpose of these visits? Police speculated it could have been a prowler scoping out properties, but something about the person's behavior didn't fit the typical pattern of a petty thief. The incident quickly gained traction online when the homeowner shared the footage with a local community group. People speculated wildly about the visitor's intentions. Some suggested it was a ritualistic act, given the strange pacing pattern. Others believed it was a psychological ploy, a way to instill fear without committing any overt crime. More superstitious commenters pointed out the timing of the visit, noting the significance of 3:15 a.m. Often referred to as the witching hour, it's considered a time when supernatural forces are at their strongest. Could this visitor have been something other than human? Theories ranged from a disturbed individual to an omen of something darker yet to come. The most unsettling part of this story came weeks later. The same hooded figure appeared again on another neighbor's porch. This time, they stayed longer, sitting cross-legged directly in front of the camera. Their head remained bowed, and for 15 minutes, they didn't move. The homeowner, like their predecessor, chose to stay silent and called the police. But as officers arrived, the visitor had already slipped away into the night. What's most haunting about this midnight visitor is the lack of closure. Were they a mere trespasser with unclear motives? Or was something more sinister driving their actions? The doorbell camera provided a glimpse, but it's what remains unseen and unanswered that lingers. Sometimes, the most terrifying stories aren't about what happened, but what could have happened. So, the next time your doorbell rings in the dead of night, think twice before answering. Because you never know who or what might be waiting on the other side. For most people, Halloween is a time for costumes, candy, and harmless fun. But for one family, a seemingly innocent decoration became a nightmarish reality. This is the story of the masked intruder. It was late October, just days before Halloween, The Johnson family's doorbell camera captured what they assumed at first was just another trick-or-treater, but they couldn't have been more wrong. The footage begins with a man standing on the porch, his face obscured by a disturbing clown mask. Unlike playful trick-or-treaters, he's not moving, not speaking. He stands motionless at the edge of the frame. The homeowner, Amanda Johnson, was in the living room when the Ring app chimed. When she checked the live feed, the still image of the masked figure made her freeze. Was it a joke? A prank? It didn't feel that way. Minutes passed, and the figure remained eerily stationary. He held a large plastic bag clutched tightly in one hand. Amanda continued to watch, her unease growing as the man slowly began to tilt his head toward the camera. It was a calculated, deliberate motion that gave her the chilling impression he could see her watching through the feed. "I've never seen anything like it," Amanda would later recount to local reporters. "He just kept standing there, staring at the camera. He didn't say a word." As Amanda debated whether to call the police, the figure made his first move. Slowly, he reached into the bag and pulled out a tattered stuffed animal, placing it carefully on the doormat. Then he stepped back into his original position and resumed staring into the camera. The act was deeply unsettling. Was it a threat? A twisted game? Amanda's husband, David, who had been asleep upstairs, was woken by her whispered pleas for him to come down. Together, they watched the live footage in silence, hearts pounding. After what felt like an eternity, the man finally broke his stance. He walked to the edge of the porch, turned to face the house one last time, and waved, a slow, mechanical wave that felt anything but friendly. Then he vanished into the night. The family called the police immediately. Officers arrived and conducted a search of the area but found no trace of the masked intruder. The stuffed animal he'd left behind was taken as evidence, though it offered no clues other than being deliberately ragged and torn. What troubled Amanda and David most was the man's behavior. It wasn't frantic or aggressive, Amanda explained. It was calm, like he knew exactly how to make us uncomfortable without breaking any laws. Weeks turned into months, and the masked man was never apprehended. The Johnson family installed additional security cameras and motion detectors, but the experience left a permanent mark. "We thought we were safe in our own home," David said. "But now, every time the doorbell chimes, we hold our breath, wondering if it's him coming back." Sometimes, what we don't see can be more terrifying than what we do. For one family, a simple knock at the door turned into an unsolved mystery that still haunts them to this day. It was a cold winter night when the Taylor family first experienced something strange. Around 11:45 p.m., they were settling in for bed when they heard it, a knock at the front door. It wasn't loud or frantic, just a steady, rhythmic tapping that echoed through the quiet house. Daniel Taylor, the father, assumed it was a neighbor or perhaps someone in need. He made his way downstairs, switching on the porch light as he approached the door. But when he checked through the peephole, he saw nothing, no visitor, no sign of movement. Puzzled, Daniel opened the door slightly, peering out into the cold night. The empty porch greeted him, illuminated only by the yellow glow of the porch light. He stepped outside, glancing around, but found no one. Daniel assumed it was a prank, kids playing around in the neighborhood. He shrugged it off and went back inside, locking the door behind him. But that was only the beginning. The second knock. Barely 20 minutes later, just as the Taylors were beginning to drift off to sleep, the knock came again. This time, it was louder, more insistent. Daniel's wife, Sarah, sat up in bed, her heart racing. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Daniel nodded, already slipping out of bed. He felt a growing unease, but he tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone really did need help this time. He hurried downstairs, turning on the porch light once more. But again, there was no one there. The camera footage from their doorbell camera showed nothing but an empty porch. Over the next few nights, the knocking continued, always at random times, always without anyone visible on the porch. What made it even stranger was the fact that the knocking sound was clearly picked up by the doorbell camera's microphone, yet no person or movement was ever detected. Daniel showed the footage to a few friends, hoping for a logical explanation. Some suggested it could be wind or tree branches, but Daniel knew better. The knocks were too deliberate, too precise. The family began to grow anxious. Sarah suggested calling the police, but Daniel hesitated. What can we tell them? That someone knocks but isn't there. They'll think we're crazy. One night, after another round of knocking, Daniel decided to wait by the door. He sat in the darkened living room, watching the front door intently. The house was silent, save for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Just past midnight, the knocking began again. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest as he slowly approached the door. He gripped the handle tightly, then swung the door open in one swift motion. But once again, there was no one there. This time, however, something caught his eye. On the doormat lay a small, crumpled piece of paper. Daniel picked it up and unfolded it. Scrawled in shaky handwriting were the words, "Don't open the door." The message was clear, but its meaning was anything but. Who had left the note? And what were they warning the Taylors about? The Taylors never found out who was behind the mysterious knocking. The incidents stopped as suddenly as they had begun, leaving the family with more questions than answers. Was it a prank taken too far? Was someone trying to scare them, or was it a genuine warning? To this day, Daniel keeps the note in a drawer by his bed, a haunting reminder of the nights when the knocking came. He often wonders what might have happened if he hadn't heeded the warning. Sometimes, the scariest encounters aren't the ones we see, but the ones we can't explain. The next time you hear a knock at your door late at night, ask yourself, is it someone needing help or something far more unsettling? In the dead of night, most neighborhoods fall into silence. But sometimes, that silence is broken by the sound of someone desperate for help. What you choose to do in those moments can haunt you forever. It was around 1 a.m. when the Wilson family's doorbell camera recorded something chilling. The footage shows a young woman stumbling onto their porch, disheveled and visibly distressed. She knocks frantically, her eyes darting nervously toward the street behind her. "Help me, please," she whispers, barely loud enough for the microphone to pick up. Inside the house, Mark Wilson had just settled into bed when his phone buzzed with a motion alert from the doorbell camera. Groggy but concerned, he opened the app to see the live feed. The sight of the woman's frantic knocking made his heart race. Mark sat up, debating whether to open the door. His wife, Lisa, stood beside him. "What is it?" she asked, noticing the tension on his face. "There's a woman at the door. She looks scared," Mark replied, showing her the footage. Lisa leaned closer, watching the woman glance anxiously over her shoulder. "Do you think it's real? What if it's a setup?" That thought hadn't crossed Mark's mind, but now it did. Stories of home invasions using similar tactics flashed through his head. He hesitated, unsure of what to do. Should he open the door and risk their safety or ignore the plea for help? In situations like these, hesitation can feel like an eternity. Every second stretches into an agonizing debate between fear and compassion. Mark decided to play it safe. He picked up his phone and dialed 911. "There's a woman on our porch asking for help," he told the operator. "She looks scared, but I'm not sure if it's safe to open the door." The operator assured him that officers were on their way. Mark stayed on the line, keeping a close eye on the live feed. The woman continued to knock, her glances toward the street becoming more frantic by the second. Suddenly, she froze. Her eyes widened in terror as she backed away from the door, disappearing from the camera's view. Mark strained to see what had frightened her, but the street beyond the porch was empty. "She's gone," Mark whispered to Lisa. "Gone where?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. Minutes later, the police arrived. Mark stepped outside to meet them, his heart pounding. The officers searched the area but found no sign of the woman. There were no footprints in the soft dirt leading away from the porch, no indication of where she might have gone. "Are you sure she was here?" one officer asked, clearly skeptical. Mark showed them the footage. The officers exchanged uneasy glances before one of them said, "We'll patrol the neighborhood and see if we can find her. Stay inside and keep your doors locked." Mark nodded, feeling a mix of relief and dread. He locked the door behind him and returned to the living room, where Lisa was waiting anxiously. "Do you think they'll find her?" Lisa asked. "I don't know," Mark admitted, "but something about this doesn't feel right." The following day, Mark reviewed the footage again. He noticed something he hadn't seen before. Just before the woman backed away, a shadow had appeared on the far edge of the frame. It moved quickly, almost too fast to notice, but it was there. He paused the video, staring at the blurred shape. Was it a person? An animal? He couldn't tell. The police never found the woman, and no one in the neighborhood reported seeing anything unusual that night. For weeks, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that he had made the wrong decision. What if she had truly needed help? What if he could have prevented something terrible from happening? Lisa tried to reassure him. "You did what you thought was best. You called for help. That's more than most people would do." But the guilt lingered. Months later, Mark came across a news report about a missing woman. The photo showed a young woman with the same haunted expression he remembered from that night. The article stated that she had last been seen in their town, not far from their neighborhood. Mark felt a chill run down his spine. Was it the same woman? He couldn't be sure, but deep down, he felt it was. And he couldn't help but wonder what might have happened if he had opened the door. Sometimes, doing the right thing isn't clear until it's too late. And sometimes, even when you do everything right, the unanswered questions remain. The next time someone knocks on your door asking for help, what will you do? Will you open it, or will you hesitate, haunted by the possibility of what might have been?